Welcome, welcome to another episode of The Shaman's Wife. I hope you're enjoying this mini-series with my dear friend Alicia. And of course, if you want to find out more about Alicia, or more about me, or more about the Heads Together podcast, go to the show notes. There will be all the links you need. And if you haven't already, I urge you to pre-order your copy, or if you're listening to this when the book has now been published, order your copy of The Shaman's Wife. This is a transformational book, and I'm so honored to have Alicia with me for this mini-series where we are diving into the background to this powerful memoir. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Heads Together podcast. I'm Jill Mokes, and I am obsessed with cutting through the noise when it comes to growing your business. Each week, via intimate coaching conversations and inspirational stories, I share what it really takes to get the results you want in a way that feels right to you. I am all about attracting higher ticket opportunities, building authentic relationships, and creating the abundant, full-fat version of your dream business. I mean, how many of us have beavered away creating a light version of what we really want? The thing is, I honestly believe when you're outstanding at what you do, there is no limit to what you can achieve. So, are you ready to put our heads together and make it happen? Let's go. Welcome back to episode 2 of this special limited series where I am joined by Alicia Rodriguez, the incredible author of The Shaman's Wife. I was about to just say a memoir, but that is just not enough to describe this book. Actually, do you know what, Alicia? That's where I want to kick off this second episode, because we touched on this at the end of the first episode, which was the topic that we're going to be talking about in this episode around navigating the bardo, that space between what was and what will be. But interesting, just thinking about, practically speaking, and in real terms, you wrote a memoir.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, it's never as simple, is it? This isn't just you recanting your story. This isn't just you sharing what happened to you with no kind of intentional reason behind that. Can you talk to us a bit about that, the collective story, I guess, that you're really sharing?
When you write a story like a memoir, you think, okay, at least I did. I thought, why would anybody care about my story? Why does anybody care that this happened to me? And you have to kind of move outside of that conversation, outside of the internal conversation. It says, what is in my story that is valuable for other people? And in my case, especially for women. That's kind of like the collective story. When you write, you realize that there's a person called a reader on the other end of the page, right? I'm the one writing the page. There's a person on the other side of that page reading. So what do I want for them? I'm always asking the question, how can I serve, right? So how can I serve the reader? And one of the things I did very intentionally was structurally. In other words, I very intentionally did like memoir chapters, and then I would take a point where I would do what I call a reflective chapter. And I was teaching something. I don't want to use the word takeaway because it kind of feels really trite, but like, I would reflect on the experience, and I'm really reflecting on the experience in a genuine way, but in a way that kind of unravels it for someone who might actually be having the same experience, if that makes sense. And so I would build that in. And some of those chapters are, one of the things I had as a goal was to share some of these shamanic traditions and principles that are very, very relevant to today's world, to modern society and the way we live. And this kind of like absence of spirituality, absence of soul, this idea that, the world goes, productivity is king, I need a result. And at what cost does that come? And so from a shaman's perspective or a shamanic perspective or a spiritual perspective, what's the answer to that? Like, what is the cost? Like, do you know what the cost is to your life, right? Which doesn't mean you have to go spend a year in Ecuador or in an ashram or anything, but it's a reflective chapter for me that is also a reflective chapter for you, the reader. So one of the things in the book that is also a collective story, if you will, is kind of I grapple with the question, I'm a confident woman, I own a business, I've done a lot in my life, and I surrendered all my power to this person. And I didn't even see it happening until it was too late. And then what does it take to reclaim that power? And that's where the courage and resiliency comes up. And so that's why a lot of those reflective chapters are like, what just happened? Coming to like the realization that it's happening. And what am I doing to maintain my sense of self, my sense of worthiness, my sense that I belong here, in the face of, a little bit of a spoiler, but some gaslighting and, cultural adaptation and all that. So the story is, I know so many really powerful women. When I serialized it, I had all these emails from women that I knew and didn't know, both, who said, I had a similar situation, but I was so ashamed I never told anyone. And so shame keeps us quiet. And shame and quiet and silence is what keeps us disempowered. And so for me, putting myself out there, which is really hard, in terms of, exposing myself like this, for someone who's really private, but in service of, this happened to me too. And I'm a confident woman and I still fell into this trap, but I got out. And so for whoever reads this, like the women that wrote to me who said, you've inspired me to be more courageous. You've inspired me to stand up to the situation. That's the collective story. It's that empowerment when we lose our sense of self and we surrender our power as women.
So for me, one of the really interesting parts of that reflection that you did in the book, which now that you've talked about it, I can see how intentional it was to do that with the reader in mind. But of course, as the reader, it just flows so beautifully. You just feel like you're taking the lesson from it. So it's really lovely that it was done very intentionally to have that effect. And so you do it masterfully. One of the lessons was around navigating the bardo. So the topic that I really would love to explore more with you, that space between what was and what will be, I think is a challenge that probably all women face, particularly in midlife. I think, regardless of whether you have made a big life-changing decision to move to another country or whether your life is just different because your kids are up and grown, there is always something in us that triggers, isn't there, in midlife, that feeling of what was isn't anymore. But I don't know what's next. I don't know what's coming. I don't know what I want. I don't know. Can we talk a little bit about that and how that played out for you, but also how you help other women navigate that?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's two ways at looking at the bardo, that space that's in between, what was and what will be. You can either look at it from a place of fear or a place of curiosity. And so the work I do is kind of transforming what looks like the void that looks scary into a place where emergence of something new and joyful is possible, right? And so that's a lot of the work that I do here in Portugal with the retreats. Because, you're right about the midlife point. I think at a certain point, especially if you're married, your kids are off to college or they're grown up or whatever, COVID was a really big initiator into this conversation, particularly for women and how they were affected by COVID and their work. And they kind of woke up to like, wait a minute, why have I been doing this kind of work this way and giving up so much of myself? And then all of a sudden saying, I don't need to go back to that. That wasn't normal. And what about me? Where am I in this equation? It's like women tend to put ourselves last, right? everything or everyone else gets taken care of. And then like, if there's something left over, then we get a little bite. This is the opportunity for someone to say, okay, and a lot of times there's some kind of catalyst that happens, a divorce or a kid's empty nest or illness and something, or, they get fired or something like that. It's a wake-up call. And that's when people start asking the question I hear, is that all there is? I have everything I ever wanted. Why am I miserable? I hear that a lot. And it's because you're not finding any joy or meaning or purpose in what you're doing. But like not doing it is like scary. What if I don't? I lose X, Y, and Z. And there's a whole litany of things that people think that they lose. I look at it as intentional choices. I'm going to trade this thing that I had for this thing that I want more at this moment in my life. I might make a different choice in 10 years or 5 years. I certainly make different choices today than I made 20 years ago, right? Because I've changed. My life has changed. And so the Bardo for me is a very fertile place for inquiring and envisioning something that is more in alignment to like where you are in your life. But the catch is, and why I tell people they have to go somewhere else is you can't do this kind of deep dive intensive experience where you live because you have obligations, you have people to take care of, you have work, you have clients, you have X, Y, and Z. You have all the obligations and responsibilities. And you also have what I call crutches, the things that keep you doing the same thing because it's a crutch. It makes me feel good. And so if I remove all of that and I put you in a completely different environment that is also full of real healthy stuff, like you've been here, Jill, great food, beautiful nature, kind of laid back lifestyle where you get to question all the assumptions you have about the way life should be, because now you're looking at something that's like, what? You mean people really live like this and they're successful and they work and what's available to you when you step out of our ordinary and step into the Bardo, into this like empty space, is possibility, is limitless possibility.
Yes.
It is. In the regular life, there's no space for you to go quietly. It's too much noise. So you have to remove all the noise, be in this quiet, absolutely beautiful place, because nature for me is a healer and a teacher. And then have that really, honest conversation with your soul and your spirit and your heart and your mind about what is the life I want to choose to live. Not that I have to live, but how do I choose to engage my life? And midlife is, like you said, a really key time for that conversation.
It really is. And I think to your point around, you can't do that at home. You can't do it in the humdrum of everyday life where you're living the thing that you are questioning. It just doesn't work. So I just couldn't agree more. I think that space, and I know, the retreats you run, the Becoming Limitless retreats, are a really great example of this. Women who come and spend time with you and have this very immersive experience of being able to clear their mind and actually examine what's possible for them, what's available for them. There's always so much more available to us than we believe to be true. And I think that space that you are able to hold for women to do that is incredibly important. To anyone listening to this, what are some, not everyone can down tools and come away on retreat straight away, right?
Yeah.
So if anyone's listening to this and this is resonating with them, this is really landing, they're like, yeah, that's absolutely where I am. I know that something's off. I'm not miserable necessarily, but I'm not living my best life. And yet at the same time, I don't even know what that is, because that's often part of the problem too, isn't it? It's like we know something's not right, but we don't know what right looks like. What would you say to those women? What are some, I guess, some ways that they can start thinking differently now, albeit the deep work that's needed is hard to do without breaking away. But are there any steps they can start to take?
It's really interesting. I just had a client today and I gave her these 2 exercises. She's kind of like in the same place. And so let me share those. So one is, part of the problem is that women say yes to everything. Sure, I'll do that. No worries. I'll do that. I'll do that. There are no boundaries, right? There's no boundary. And a boundary isn't so much about keeping people out. A boundary is about keeping my wholeness, the integrity of who I am, right? And so we don't have criteria for what we say yes to and what we say no to. So one of the exercises that's really easy, but very simple exercises, very powerful, is you take a piece of paper, column 1 is yes, column 2 is no. How do you know? What is the criteria for saying yes? If it meets this criteria, I say yes. On the other column, it's no. If it meets this criteria, it's a no. We fudge. We go, oh, well, this time, and we cross our own boundaries. People don't cross boundaries. We allow them to cross boundaries, right?
So true.
And part of it is because we haven't really determined the criteria for saying yes and no. So just make a list of like, I would say yes if it meets this criteria. And I would say no if it meets this criteria. Like in business, I say no. So if someone wants to hire me, and the first question out of their mouth is, how much is it? Without knowing anything about what I offer or what kind of program it is or anything, I already know it's a no. It's like, that's a no. That's just no. Let's cut to the chase. That's a no. On my yes column is someone who asks me the unusual questions about their life. So it might be a leader and they're not interested in maybe having the CEO spot. They're interested in, how can I make a greater impact in my organization so I can solve this really important problem around climate change? Okay, now you got my attention, right? These are my yes column. This is my no column. And it's just the same thing. If you know my life here, right? I have great friends. And sometimes, I say my work is interfering with my social life. And you know what that means because you've been here.
Absolutely. And for anyone listening, Alicia and I have run a retreat together along with Lauren, and we have done lots of work together. I've been out to Ferraguda where Alicia lives a couple of times, and every time I've almost felt like I've immersed into her life because I've come back with life envy and friend envy. Like I'm thinking of trading in all my own friends and just coming and stealing Alicia's. For any of my friends listening, that was a joke-ish. Yeah, absolutely. And do you know what? I think that just reinforces the point you made earlier about people coming out and spending time with you and thinking, oh, can life look like this? Can life look like getting up in the morning and being on the cliffs? And can life look like finishing my working day with a swim in a beautiful warm sea on hot sand? Like, oh, okay. I didn't know life could look like that at that pace.
Right.
So again, I guess that's that point, isn't it? Of there's just nothing quite like forging that space. But I love what you're saying about the boundaries and the yes column and the no column. What a simple, powerful exercise for people to do. Mm-hmm. One thing that I think is really key to that, and I think this is another theme from the book really, is intuition. So you are an incredibly intuitive person. And I think for women listening, some women will be saying, well, okay, but I don't know what makes something a yes and what makes something a no, because so many of us are very disconnected from our gut. And I think becoming more attuned to our gut, to our intuition is another step, isn't it? Another primary step. And what I really love about doing work around intuition is that suddenly exercises like the one you've just set become very easy. When you're very tuned in, yes and no's are very clear to you. And also making bigger decisions like to go on retreat, like to do something big and invest in yourself like that, that becomes an easier decision to make too, if you're very attuned.
So I was just going to say there's a bridge between, like you said, people don't know what to say yes to, what to say no to. And then there's intuition on this side. I want to just offer the second exercise, which is like a bridge from here to there. And that's like another 2 column. So most of us live from here up and they forget all about the body. And the body never lies. Never, ever lies. The body does its thing because it does its thing. And so the second exercise is kind of like a somatic exercise in many ways. It's 2 columns. It's like noticing what depletes you. And then in the other column, noticing what energizes you. That could be what kind of conversation depletes you, right? Or what kind of conversation energizes you. Or it could be what kind of activity depletes you and what kind of activity energizes you. And so between those 2 exercises, you get the bridge over to learning to connect with your intuition. And sometimes that connection starts through the body. Because in Western culture in particular, intuition is not valued the way knowledge or empirical evidence is valued. I live like 90% intuitively, but I come from a culture, a Latin culture, where ever since I was little, we valued intuition. It's not really a skill. It's because we all are intuitive. We just haven't developed it.
Yeah, I completely agree. We are all intuitive. It's just some of us choose to attune to it and others either don't know how to or don't know they can.
Right. Or they're afraid because sometimes your intuition flies in the face of evidence. And I can tell you those times where I haven't listened to my intuition, I have regretted.
Oh, same. Absolutely the same. I'm incredibly intuitive when it comes to decision making. So 99.9% of decisions I make are made intuitively. And on the odd occasion when I've stayed up in my brain and made the decision just based on some kind of logical evidence or something, it's always backfired. Always.
Yeah. And you kick yourself. I knew this. Why did I do that?
It's so true. So true. I always say, but you know better than that. Why? Why did you ignore yourself?
Yeah, why did you ignore it?
Yeah, so very, very true. Alicia, thank you so much. This is really evolving into an incredible series. It's exactly what I hoped it would be, which is that you've written the most amazing book. The Shaman's Wife is a fabulous standalone book. Buy the book, read it. You don't have to, listen to anything else or do anything else. You will love the book. But for me, it's such a rich book, full of themes, full of lessons, full of kind of empowering concepts that I've absolutely absorbed from the book. So this is exactly what I was hoping for this series, was that you and I could get to have this deeper conversations about some of those themes. So thank you for sharing so generously with us. Again, I'm going to put links in the show notes to Alicia, where you can find out, depending on when you're listening to this episode, you may be able to pre-order the book or you may be able to buy it. So please go ahead, look, check it out, get a copy, pre-order it now or buy now. And if you do that, you can read alongside listening to this. You're going to really get even more value because you're going to absolutely be exploring this with us. And if it's not out yet, then you're absolutely going to have something to look forward to. Thank you so much, Alicia, for joining me again today. In our next episode, in episode 3 of this series, we're going to be talking about heeding the call and looking at the heroine's journey. So that's going to be a really special one because we've touched on some of this, but I would really love to go to that part in the book of that heroine's journey and really continuing the theme of today around intuition and heeding the call. So I look forward to seeing you back here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. Looking forward to it.
Bye for now. I hope you enjoyed this episode and that getting our heads together this week has filled your mind with what's possible. If you love the show, would you do me a massive favour, please? Would you leave a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts? It would really help me put more heads together, reach more ears and expand more minds. Until next week, bye for now.